Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Tamara and we're here with another book review. Did I think I'd be getting another book review out before 2025 came to an end? No, I did not. I literally yesterday read a book from the beginning to finish and was obsessed. And when those things happen to me, I feel like I have to make a YouTube review for it because I need to talk about it and I want to hear everyone else's thoughts too. And that book is the second book to the Plated Prisoner series, GLINT. Now I'm saying second because that's exactly what this is. The Plated Prisoner series, I believe, has 5 to 6 books out right now or something of that nature, and this is the second. The first one is GILD. GILD is probably what most people have heard of up until, when it comes to the hype and the beginning of the book series, GILD is the first book. I did read GILD. I read it a couple weeks ago. And with that being said, I just wanted to make that clear. I did not make a video for GILD because, in my opinion, not a lot happens in GILD for it to warrant a lot of, deep thought or speculation. And I when I make these reviews, I'm pretty passionate. And I feel like this one didn't do that to me, but I gave it a 3 to 5. I did enjoy it. And I also just thought that this was a great setting stage for the following books to come. And that's exactly what it was. And I enjoy it and appreciate it more for that reason, especially after reading book 2. Now, book 2 we're going to talk about, but I will make some nods to book 1, just because, as mentioned before, not a lot happened, and some of the things that did happen, we can briefly talk about it because I just feel like it can be easily summarized into like 2 sentences, to be honest, because truly, in my opinion, not much happened in this book, but I still really liked it. So for Glint, I gave it a 4 to 5. It is a 4 to 5 read for me. I almost gave it a 5 out of 5, but like there's a part of me that itches for just a little bit more, which I really have a feeling is coming in book 3 based off of how this book ended and the piqued interest that I have right away to buy the next couple books. I am hopeful that book 3 gives me the 5 out of 5 that I'm itching for. But yeah, so just so you know, this is a spoiler talk review. If you haven't read the books and you don't care to, or you don't want to be spoiled, step aside, come back. And if you really don't care at all, then let's just talk about it. These books, I have heard about these books because a lot of people started telling me about this great MMC named Slade. And they literally compare this man to like the top MMCs in the romantasy world. And that's a big thing to say, especially because I've been really divulging into romantasy and I wanted to know what the hype's all about and is it true? So that was piqued interest number 1, is to read these to see what the hype was all about this amazing MMC everyone talks about. But another thing is that these books actually make a nod to an old legend about King Midas. And if you guys don't know who King Midas is, there was like old folklore about a man who was a king, Midas, and he could turn anything he touched into gold. And there was a bunch of stories about him, and this world is a nod at those folklore legends about King Midas. And I appreciate that because I like legends. I like folklore. That's what kind of brought me to read Bonds of Hercules, Blood of Hercules, those books too, because I just like when people take different references and make it their own in their own world development. And that's exactly what these books did. So 2 piqued interest, and they did satisfy in every single way, and they are continuing to do so from what I can see. But let's talk about it. So GILD, like I said, I could summarize it in 2 sentences, and I feel like I really can. The first book really gives you an introduction to our FMC, Aurene. I'm going to call her that. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correct, but Aurene. And she technically is King Midas's prized possession. He touched her with his golden hand. However, she did not fully turn to gold. It's almost like he gilded her, aka the name of the book. So she is full human still. Like, it's not like she's a statue of gold. She still is very much heart beating alive. But he almost like just touched her where she has like a sheath of gold, pretty much. That is her true skin, and her hair is gold. And she just looks like a stunning trophy prize and a spectacle that people have ventured far to come and now witness. And she is put in a cage and essentially is out for display all the time. She plays a harp. She's meant to be some prized possession. Aurene is the main POV from the first book, and even in the second book is primarily her, but there are some other characters as well. And her and Midas's relationship when you first start off reading about it, it is very much like he's the king, he owns her, and all she wants to do is please him. This world is kind of a little bit tied in a sense to Spartacus. Like, sex in this world is for entertainment, it's for play. You find a lot in the first book that they really try to set the stage on that. Like, she is in this cage in this big courtroom and just witnessing King Midas have a ton of sex with males, women. He calls them his saddles, by the way. Like, that is the common term referenced in here. And he just like has his way with them. They just want to please him. When he has royal visitors and guests come over, these saddles are paid to have sex with all these other guests to satisfy the entertainment aspect of this world that they're in. And then Aurene is just forced to watch in a cage, and all she wants to do is to please Midas and be a value of Midas. Now, this whole manipulation as to why she values this man so much, at first in the first book was a little bit more like she felt like she owes him for saving her from a really dark world that she came from. It was a lot of pain. It was a lot of, fighting to survive. And it alludes to women in this universe not being very highly represented as anything but saddles. And so it's a pretty aggressive world out there for women. But he ended up finding her at a young age, bringing her in, and swore to protect her. And this was one of the ways he did that, was by making her his gilded precious. He keeps calling her precious, like Smeagol in the Ring. And in that sense, she's in a cage. No one can harm her, but she also is in a way lonely and pretty much hasn't seen the outside world. And God knows how long since he brought her when she was a kid, and they were a similar age. So they had some friendship, which was what was interpreted, but prior to him touching her with gold and prior to him even becoming a king. So she got to see this character before he came into his power. And that is what Aurene seems to be holding on to in terms of her love for him. She knows he's a good king because she saw him when he was nothing and became something. So she's undyingly loyal to Midas. And that truly is the first book. You realize like how much of a prisoner and how much he's manipulated in a way to be undyingly loyal. And then by the end of the first book, and also Midas is married for advantage in the first book, and his queen doesn't appreciate Aurene because she's favored and whatnot. None of the other saddles appreciate or like her because she's favored. It's an envious thing, but she's incredibly lonely. She doesn't talk to anybody. She's guarded all the time. And the only real interaction she gets excitement for is for Midas, because he's the only one that talks to her and treats her like a human. At the end of the first book, she and the rest of the saddles, they end up going venturing to another kingdom. So there's a couple kingdoms in this, and Midas controls the sixth kingdom. And there's some politics that play into the first book that was interesting. I'll give it that. I feel like the last quarter of the first book really started to pick up. And in doing that too, Aurene got to travel to another kingdom with the rest of the saddles. And during that whole experience, unfortunately, pirates had invaded and taken the saddles and her and killed some of the guards that she slowly but surely became friends with along the journey. And Midas wasn't with them. He had already gone to the kingdom to meet the rest of the group, so he was not there. But then they were taken, and that's kind of how the end of book one really finishes. And you start off with her being captive, not by a set of pirates, but instead another group from a kingdom called the Fourth Kingdom, who is known to be as ruthless as can be. They have a perception, people fear them, and even Midas doesn't want to dabble with an army that big. It's just, they have a reputation, and they're the ones who now take Aurene and the saddles and the guards from the Sixth Kingdom in the possession now of the Fourth Kingdom. And that's exactly where we end up at the end of book one. Now in book two, meaning GLINT, and I know I said I talked about, book one in 2 sentences, but I guess I couldn't. I had to talk about it. Book two picks up right away with Aurene and the rest of the group being captive, and they don't know what they plan on doing with them. They all came from a brutal world, and with that, they expected to essentially be raped and mistreated and misused based on where they came from in the realm of how women are treated. And Aurene specifically, because she's favored and no one was ever allowed to touch her besides Midas, and especially sexually. So she developed some sense of not love. It is love. She loves Midas in a weird way, but she just always had this hopeful mentality that like you can be respected as a woman, and you don't need to be selling yourself out for money like some of the other saddles have to do to survive. And so she's trying to connect with these saddles and encouraging them to have their own voice, because she's coming into her own voice. And with that being said, she doesn't want to be a prisoner in a cage anymore. And this second book really divulges into Oreen's journey and becoming her own voice, becoming her own person. Now, the character of Slade. So it turns out in book 2, the head commander for the 4th Army, so the ones that took them at the end of the first book from the pirates, the ones who have a terrible reputation for being cruel and wicked, Slade is technically the commander of that army, and in addition, he's also the king of the 4th Kingdom. And we don't discover that until the end of the book. However, the journey that Oreen starts to visualize, she doesn't know he's the king. She just knows he's the commander. And he's also a fae. She knows that right away. And then we also discover that Oreen is fae. And that's part of her secret as to why the world was so cruel to her prior to Midas coming and saving her from that cruel fate, is because in their history, faes have been beaten up. They've been, eradicated, and there's not many faes left. And that kingdom of the fae, it no longer truly exists anymore because they pose as a threat, and there was a rebellion, and there's a lot of politics that went into play. So she's a hidden fae, and he, in her eyes, isn't very hidden. He's just walking about, and she's so surprised that no one doesn't realize that he's fae. But they wouldn't necessarily know what to look for unless you are fae. So she recognizes him right away, and he recognizes her as just being one of the same kind. Now, throughout the journey, she starts to realize that these people that have this reputation that she's heard of, the commander, his army, they're not cruel people, and they're incredibly loyal people to a sense of righteousness, that they continuously try to remind Oreen that it's not them who isn't fair, who isn't righteous. It's actually King Midas, like how he rules. His people are starving. His people are, miserable, and yet she's always in a cage and is valued for being in a cage, and like that's not a sense of freedom. So the entire cast pretty much of the 4th Kingdom that we get introduced to along this journey is continuously trying to remind Oreen that there is so much more to this world besides the closed cages that she's seen and has heard of, and she just needs to open her eyes. And the journey she goes on to recognize her own self-worth is incredibly engaging. It's admirable, but she also develops such a voice to protect those who can't be protected. And you can just tell this character, she has her own powers. She has powers that we've learned about between book 1 and 2, about her ribbons, what exactly they mean, what they do, how now she can turn things to gold, and that's why she wears gloves. And I don't think, and this is just me speculating into the next books to come, I was thinking about this quite a bit, because Midas, at the end of the book, they return Oreen to Midas, and Midas is like so obsessed with power that he doesn't necessarily hear her as a person. He's just glad he has his weapon back. And he keeps making all these references to how much she can make for him. Make meaning in gold. And if he can produce his own gold because he's Midas, then why does he rely so heavily on her? And I have a feeling, unless I missed it in the books, but I don't think I did, that when he gold plated her, that he gave her too much of his power, where his is dwindling, and now he needs her to upkeep the power that he's gained this whole time. And that's my thought, because I feel like he's relying too much on that, not only the fact that she's a symbol of his power, but that she actually can do things with his power. It's almost like she's borrowing it, but it's indirect. Like, I feel like he indirectly gave her power that he did not intend to when he made her gold, let's say, back when that happened. But anyways, we digress. We'll touch on that. That's just a theory that I have that I hope they explain a little bit further in the books, and that's just based on how the book ended and his obsession with her at the end, that I was like, I feel like he's using her because he's lost some of his power, and it's just not confirming that yet. Okay, but the second book truly reminded me a little bit of Shield of Sparrows, which is a 5 out of 5 book, by the way. Read it. It's so stinking good. And it reminded me of Mist of Fury, so the second ACOTAR book, because in a way, Slade, we're going to call him Slade, even though in this book you only get exposed to that name at the very, very end of book 2, where he fully admits who he is to her. And it was one of those things that made me smile, because I had an inkling that this was him based on how their like tension was building throughout this, but it didn't confirm that was his name, Slade. He went by different names. He went by different, reputations. So I was thinking it's him, but he didn't confirm until the very end. But in this book, that whole confirmation where it was like a head of a commander, and then there was a plot twist that he is the rightful ruler, and he kind of duped her and not really telling her the truth. That whole revelation reminded me of Shield of Sparrows, with again the king from that kingdom who's also Fae, and there's a whole thing about that. So that's where that reminded me of that book. And then secondly, this character in a weird way reminds me of the Night Court and Rhysand from ACOTAR, meaning that Slade does, because he has this big reputation, obviously, of being entirely cruel, manipulative, and has really strong Fae abilities. I'm not going to say Fae abilities because not everyone knows he's Fae, but his group, like that, his core group that he trusts, really reminds me of Rhysand's group from ACOTAR, because there's like a female equivalent kind of, that becomes really buddy-buddy with Aurene. The guys are really humorous and very undyingly loyal. They know that Slade is a Fae, and they're just undyingly loyal to him. And getting introduced to those characters and seeing him have friends the same way that Rhysand has friends despite his reputation, and seeing it through Aurene's eyes, was really like, it was heartening, and I really enjoyed it. And it reminded me a lot of that book. And it also reminded me, with the big reveal as to who Slade was, is that the king has a horrible reputation of being ruthless, and the commander's meant to be his pet. But since they're one and the same, the mask and persona he puts on as the king is worse than the commander's persona. And it reminded me again of Rhysand and ACOTAR, when he has to deal with the true Night Court, and he has to be like an eviler version of himself to get by with like the threat level, to make people believe in the rumor. And that is what it kind of teases with Slade in this too, at the very end, when he tells her who he is, and even his whole demeanor being like sly and manipulative and almost like playing games and sassy. He was like that throughout the book as the commander, but it really kicked into character at the end, as if he was like super triumphant, and just his tone of voice changes in my imagination. And that's why I'm like, interesting, because I have a feeling this is going to go in a similar way. But I do think that the politics of like what he's looking for, because he's looking for additional land from Midas at the end of this. So he does use her to get his gain. He was manipulating her from the get-go, in a sense, and as much as she tried to fight it, she ended up developing some sense of a respect for him and his court. I'm calling them the court, for him and his army and his people. And it was really interesting to see her character grow, to see his character soften to her as well. And the whole time you're questioning what's his angle, including myself. I was really questioning what's his angle, and I still am. But I do think that he's incredibly mysterious in a way that, let's say, Rhysand wasn't. But I'm interested in what that character wants and what he is looking for. And there is a kiss that is shared in this book that's almost mysteriously weird. Like, she didn't expect it. We kind of were like, oh, like reading it, because you can see the tension, but they didn't really like get romantic up until this like tease of a kiss that's meant to throw her off. And it even threw me off a little bit. But I have a feeling, because Faye, we know in other books, they have a mate, like a true mate. And I'm wondering if she is his mate. And that's kind of what brought him to her in the first place, in addition to maybe having some motive. Because he did mention in this book that she was not intended to be there when he came to the pirates. Like, he didn't know she was going to be there. And it was something he happened upon or something like that. So I don't know. Like, I'm curious, and I'm wondering, are they mates and that's what's bringing them together? Or is it just, there's some other reasons, like her lineage, because she does divulge in where she came from, and it was the Fae world. I think it was called like Aurelia or something like that. And I don't know, there was just so much history and politics and character development in this one, and you got so much more of the world. Like, you met another female character who is very much with Slade. Like, he's one of his main confidants, and she is so much like, she's a reflection of what women can be if they were given the choice of what they can be. And amongst the Fourth Kingdom, women aren't viewed as saddles. They're not viewed disrespectfully. They're given a choice. And that is what that whole group is trying to keep telling Lorene, is that she has a choice, including the commander is telling her that. Everyone's been telling her that, and she has never had the option really to choose, because all she wanted was safety. Midas gave her that, and her voice completely went unheard for the years that followed up until now. So her character deciding what or what not to do, unfortunately, she ended up back with Midas because of her undying loyalty, only to realize she had made that mistake when he put her back in the cage and forced her into a cage. And now she's like realizing how much she doesn't want this life. Like, she likes the idea of freedom and to choose, maybe choose to be a warrior, maybe learn to fight, maybe choose to embrace the fae that she is, because she's been suppressing it for as long as she has. And the key person, again, similar to ACOTAR, Mist of Fury, Rhysand was teaching Feyre how to become her own person in the second ACOTAR book. And in a way, Slade was teaching Aurene how to become her own person and embrace that freedom that is so close to being hers, but she just never knew it because she didn't feel like she ever needed to grasp it because she was safe. And that's exactly what she just keeps saying, is that someone is keeping her safe, but she can keep her own self safe. And that's what she realizes at the end, that she has that ability, that she doesn't have to be afraid of the world anymore. And that's due to Slade and his group of people. So it's one of those things where I just thought it was incredibly interesting to see her grow these ties to different people that she learns to trust, and like broaden her mind with this world. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I love the mystery of Slade. I love the surprise at the end. I love Aurene being blind but trying to still be kind to the saddles, who are so envious and are so hateful because she's always been favored, never had to have the hard life. They don't know she's fae. They don't know that she had come from something of difficulty, because all she is like, you know, in a pretty cage, never touched, never had to fight for anything. And that's what people assume. So we got to learn a lot more about her struggles, and in addition, like some background as to what happened to the fae. And I'm just really excited as to what's going to happen now, because pretty much at the end of this book, not only did Slade introduce himself as Slade, who is the king of the Fourth Kingdom, but he pretty much implied that we're going to be seeing a lot of each other because your king is hosting some party and my people are allowed now to join. So it is to be expected, I would assume, that they may break her free, or that she may ask them for help because she already turned them down once. And now she wants to maybe take back on that offer and become her own person. I don't know. I'm just hopeful. I'm just so hopeful. Okay, guys, I think that was it of my gist. But oh yeah, and then Midas's wife is completely trying to take over the Sixth Kingdom while he's away at the Fifth Kingdom, trying to rein in his power. And that's where Aurene and Slade and everyone are now. They're in the Fifth Kingdom. But the entire time you learn that his wife wants to take back the kingdom, being the sixth that she grew up with, that her parents ruled over, and she feels like Midas completely took away her voice by marrying into the family, and she wants to take it back. So she's the one who sent the pirates actually after Aurene and the rest of Midas's, you know, saddles and guards, to dismantle his forces, and then she could have more of an opportunity to have time to take over and politic on that side, to represent that she's a rightful ruler instead of it needing to be a man, which is Midas. And so in this interim, she's doing all of this work to set herself up until he comes back, and she'll have enough favor to outrule him when he returns. So that's a really interesting political side too. And I can't hate the woman because I understand why she's doing what she's doing, but I do think it's just really interesting about, you know, how she's trying to come into power a little bit. It reminds me a little bit of Vikings and Game of Thrones, and all of these things I absolutely love, like all these comparisons, ACOTAR, Shield of Sparrows, Vikings, Game of Thrones, Midas, like it's just fascinating stuff to me. So I'm gonna continue to probably post more reviews on these books as I read them, and starting from book 2. So we're gonna do book 3 next, and we'll go from there, guys. But let me know your thoughts. I truly think this is worth the hype thus far, and I hope I'm not wrong. But bye for now.